Welcome into a Thursday, January 9th edition of Daily Faceoff Live. The show is a presentation of Bet365. Download the app today. Use the promo code NATION. Whatever the moment, it's never ordinary at Bet365. Over on the Daily Faceoff YouTube, we're looking for your inbox questions for a little bit later on. Drop them in with the hashtag askdfo. I'm Tyler Yaremchuk, and as always, he is Frank Saravalli, both wearing green today, matching.
Not really. That's Forest. I don't even know what you'd call this.
Yeah, you're more of a mint, I suppose. But either way, same.
Feeling color. Minty fresh today. Let's go.
There you go. I like that. Carter Hutton's going to join us in a little bit for a new edition of the Blue Paint. We're going to dig into a couple of crease situations from around the league. We also have our Dominion Lending Poll Center Dominion Lending Center's poll question up in the YouTube chat. Easy for me to say. Have your say on that. Frank and I will discuss it in a little bit, and more trade talk coming today as well. But first, Frank, let's start with one of the more intriguing results from last night in the NHL. The Washington Capitals take down the Vancouver Canucks 2-1 in overtime. First off, before we even get into the Canucks, Pierre-Luc Dubois, 2-goal night, including the overtime winner. The Capitals win despite only getting 18 shots. But how about PLD catching fire for the Caps? Points in 5 straight.
It's been an incredible turnaround, and definitely one that I wasn't sure that we'd see. I mean, I was thinking that with the way last season ended in LA and the trade, that this was a guy whose career was on the ropes. I know it sounds funny to say for someone only 1 year into an 8-year deal, but that's multiple stops between Columbus, Winnipeg, LA, where it just wasn't working. There would be flashes of brilliance, but none of the sustained, consistent effort and compete. If you're the LA Kings, you had to watch last night's game against the Canucks and your head had to be exploding on, this is the guy we wanted to get. This is the guy we paid for. And yet here he is doing it in Washington. The work rate is totally different than what we saw in LA. And that part is a big reason why he's been successful.
Yeah, up to 33 points on the season now. Now let's dig into the flip side of this. Vancouver loses again, but hey, they pick up another point. They have 10 loser points this year, the most in the NHL. They also only have 2 wins in their last 10. And if we want to look at kind of the last 5-6 weeks for the Canucks, since December 1st, sure, they have points in 13 of 18. They've only won 6 of those 18 games. They're averaging under 3 goals per game at 2.72. They're only averaging 24 shots on goal per game. You couple that with the Demko injury and Pettersson, who you see here on the screen. Who knows when he's back? Philip Hronek is eligible to go on a conditioning stint, but no one knows a for sure timeline there either. And it's like, Frank, they're in a playoff spot somewhat comfortably here at the halfway point. But when you look at the way things are trending, it's easy to be worried about where the Canucks are going to go in the next month.
Easy for you to be worried.
Okay.
I'm not worried. Milk, squirt, just getting some points. I mean, look, that's really what's happening here. I mean, as tough as it is at times to watch, because they are milking points, and that's really the name of the game in the NHL standings, you can't go 2 to 3 straight weeks without any points. You need to continue to pile them up. However you do it, the Canucks have arguably been pretty successful in that. That said, I understand why you'd be concerned. The inconsistency has certainly been a problem. But given what's happened in the last 2 to 3 weeks, not having Hughes or Hronek and the back end that they'd had on the ice, if you could tell me that they'd have all these injuries, and not just like any injuries, 2 of their top 2 defensemen, I mean, they're both of their top 2 defensemen, out for a stretch of time. Hronek working his way back. He's going to be practicing with Abbotsford. He's getting closer. Hughes is in the lineup, obviously not at 100%. But if you would have told me that they'd get through that and having entered on the wild card spot, that downturn, and still are there at the other end of it, I'd say you get a thumbs up from me.
Obviously, a lot of the trade chatter around the Canucks is based on Miller and Pettersson, Pettersson and Miller, Miller or Pettersson, whatever way you want to flip it and frame it. Is there any chance that you think this front office, that we've said it 100 times, traditionally very, very aggressive, the most aggressive in the league, is there any chance that they go, you know what, this team, even with the, call it behind the scenes issues, was 1 game away from the Western Conference final last year, and who knows how far they could have gone? Is there a chance Jim Rutherford and Patrick Allvin just say, you know what, let's keep everybody, let's add, let's go for it, and then we'll deal with whatever we have to deal with in the summer? Or do you think it's the big move or stand pat?
I tend to lean more towards the latter, because I just don't think this team, as currently assembled, is a true Stanley Cup contender. I think they're a playoff team. I think they could do some damage if everyone's healthy and in the right position. But there's too many question marks for me about this defense core, unless it drastically changes, which the Canucks have been trying to do since training camp broke in September. And they realized, I think, how short they were at the position, that they need to fix it. So this wouldn't be like the go out and make a big splash, because like you're not going to go out and add a rental piece. I don't think they did that last year. They pushed their chips in. They made significant moves with Lindholm and Zadorov, and they really went out there and tried to fix it. And they did have a nice little run. The playoff hockey in Vancouver in the spring was fantastic, but that doesn't mean that you should do it every year. And I don't think this team is in the same position as the one last year, where just about everything that could go right did.
Frank, you're pretty low on the concernometer when it comes to the Vancouver Canucks, but let me throw a couple of other situations around the league at you, including the Boston Bruins, who are a big topic of the DFO rundown today with yourself and Jason Gregor. New episode of that, wherever you get your podcast from. And let's say the scale is 1 to 10, 10 being sound all the alarms, this team is in trouble, 1 being Tyler, why are they even in this conversation? Where do you come out on this Bruins team that's 3-5-2 in their last 10?
About a 6.5 or a 7. I mean, enough to be concerned, but I still think that this is a good team that's drastically underachieved so far this year. 2 big issues, and kind of the name of the game: goals for and goals against. Goals against, they're 27th or whatever it is. What do you have here? 20th. Depends on which metric you use, by game or total goals. So 20th. Goals for, 29th. I mean, really missed Jake DeBrusk. Their offense isn't clicking the way that it should. They get very little production from their top guys so far, it seems, this year. And it's also happening at the same exact time in which, well, Jeremy Swayman has a .918 save percentage for his career entering this season and is at .893. I mean, one of those things is probably enough to sink a season. Both of those things, offense not scoring and your goaltending not very good, that's tough to survive both those things. To be that far down in goals for, 29th, and to have goaltending and save percentage that bad, also probably in the mid to low 20s. The fact that the Bruins are in a playoff spot, I think, is probably an indication that they're better than they've shown.
Yeah, right now by points percentage, they are 8th in the Eastern Conference. But I mean, hey, if a team like Montreal, if a team like Columbus, I'm just doing like quick math, if either one of those two teams win all of their games in hand, again, we're way too early to be talking about games in hand, I understand that, but Boston could get leapfrogged by both of those teams. The gap is not that big. So, I mean, maybe facing a little bit.
Who scares you?
Well, that is kind of the point, I guess. But also, if you're a Bruins fan, you've won 20 of your 43 games. The new coach bump is kind of, and I know new coach Joe Sacco,
it wears off.
He's in.
It wears off. It's worn off in Chicago with Anders Sorensen. I think statistically they've pinpointed that the new coach bump like quite literally lasts like 2 to 3 games.
Well, that brings me to the second team I want to ask you about, Frank, and it's out west. It's the other side of the Jim Montgomery situation in St. Louis. I know they had the big win in the Winter Classic, but really ever since that little bump under Montgomery, they've gone back to just being 500. Basically, since the start of December, they're a 500 hockey team. And the concern level here with St. Louis isn't that like the bottom's going to fall out and they're going to, be down by the San Jose's of the conference. But the concern level for me would be that even with the new coach, they are nothing more than mid, and mid won't get you in the playoffs.
Couldn't agree more, and I'm going to give them a 9. I'm concerned about the overall state of the Blues and where they head from here. It's nice to be really excited about Jimmy Snuggerud, and I thought the Cam Fowler trade, they barely gave up anything to get him. I think the Broberg and Holloway transactions were really smart with the offer sheet to try and find some younger players to add to your group. This team, to me, doesn't have enough juice. And they are mid. And I think when you look at where they go from here, what's the next thing that's going to come along that's going to push them up the ladder? And I think we had this discussion the other day, but when you think about rebuilds and you think about where everyone's heading, the Blues are the team that's bucking the trend, saying, well, in our market, we really can't rebuild. We can't go to the bottom of the standings for a period of years. We've got to be competitive. We've got to keep fan interest, all these things. But on the other end of that, what's the reward? How does St. Louis get from where they're at now to being in the top 8 or getting into our inner circle of Stanley Cup contenders? I don't see a path for them to do that, particularly when they're going to be drafting in the mid-teens again.
Yeah.
They're making smart picks. They've drafted as well as anyone. And Adam Jiricek just played at World Junior. That looks like a fantastic mid-first round pick. All those things are great, but they're in the worst possible position I think any team can be in. I don't mean the Blues specifically, but anyone that's not good enough for the playoffs, but not bad enough to be in the lottery. The Islanders, the Kraken, the Blues, those are tough places to be.
Yeah, that is fair. One more for you on the concerno-meter. I know we're running long here, but Matvei Michkov. Stephen Ellis has his latest Calder Trophy rankings out now. Michkov slipped down to the 3 spot for our friend Stephen Ellis. I could argue he should be down in the 4 spot. Dustin Wolf maybe wants to have a word with the Calder Trophy talk, but 1 goal in his last 14 games. Been a roller coaster rookie year. Where are you at with Michkov?
Special player. The Flyers did a fantastic job tamping down expectations, and he's probably, I would say, met them in so many regards. The standard or threshold is really high for John Tortorella and some of the other non-negotiables that he has. And I think that part has definitely been an adjustment. It seems like Michkov is on board, but we knew there were going to be hiccups here. And people have been surprised when I've answered the question this way. What's your Calder ballot look like right now? I have Celebrini 1, Lane Hudson 2, and Michkov 3. And people say, well, how could you have Michkov 3? Look at all the special moments that he's had, the overtime winners, everything else. Yeah, but there is the other side of this. And Lane Hudson just seemed to experience a lot of that in the first 6 weeks of the season, where some of his warts were on display. I'm choosing to look at the fact that he's having one of the best rookie seasons by any defenseman in a long time. And point production, like we're talking Brian Leetch, Nick Lidstrom, he's on pace for like 62 points potentially as a rookie defenseman.
Yeah, it is special. We'll have some Calder talk next week on the show. Let's zero in on some trade deadline stuff. The deadline countdown series is on over at dailyfaceoff.com. A new deadline themed article every day. And yesterday it was talk about Dylan Cozens. He's also part of our poll question today, so people can have their say there. But potential suitors for the Sabres young centerman if he does indeed move. And here were the 6 teams that Matt Larkin had: the Flames, the Blackhawks, the Red Wings, the Predators, the Flyers, and the Canucks. An interesting mix here. Which team stands out the most to you, Frank?
I think the Calgary Flames, they're really on the hunt for a center. I think they're one of the teams that's been calling and checking in on Cozens and seeing what that price looks like. Look, it's a right shot center at that. Like, they've set their wish list. They're looking for a top end right shot center. I think the bigger question I have about Cozens is what is he and what is a reasonable level of production? 31 goals, 68 points 2 seasons ago. When you look at this last season and a half since, over the last season and a half, he still is about 10, 11 points shy of that combined. And so it's not just a goal scoring thing or a point production thing. It's when you're going to make a trade and give up assets for someone like Cozens, what are you betting on? What level are you betting that he's going to get to with your organization? And so I think for Calgary, with what their needs are and what their age scheme is, he's almost a perfect fit in that regards.
And the other interesting part of it is what teams can meet what Buffalo would want to be willing to move off this, right? Like,
well, what is reasonable then for Buffalo to ask based on the things that we were just talking about?
Yeah, and again, we had this conversation the other day. It's a bit of a catch-22 where, like, if he starts playing really well and he's looking like the Dylan Cozens of a few years ago, it's like, well, don't trade him. But if you want to trade him, you want fair value, or Buffalo maybe wants a little bit more than what others would consider fair value, and it really does complicate the whole thing. We did get a comment: how are the Leafs not in on him with him being a centerman? I mean, listen, the Leafs are money in, money out. You can't get a $7.1 million guy ahead of the deadline without sacrificing something significant.
And you couldn't stand the risk if you're Toronto of what happens if he is just a 20 goal, 45 point player.
Yeah.
you can't find out the hard way. I'd argue Calgary with tons of cap space. Nashville should take a flyer based on, their situation, maybe not cap space wise, but they're in such desperate need of a center. I mean, Detroit has already unfortunately gone down this path. They've got Kopp and Comfer, guys that they signed to big money free agent tickets that's really the only kind of range that they're producing in. It's really hard to get your hands on a 23-year-old center that has upper echelon potential that showed it at 21. The problem is we haven't seen it since.
All right, we are going to get to Carter Hutton in a second, but one more topic to quickly hit on here, Frank. It's the deadline countdown article from today, and we're calling this one "Winning the Deadline," but it's looking back at what past Stanley Cup champions did at the deadline. So, Pat, we got a board here, and on the left side, you see the Stanley Cup champion. On the right side, it's did they give up a first-round pick, and if they did, who did they get? And it's interesting to see that more often than not, the team that goes on to win the Stanley Cup isn't moving on from a first-round pick at the deadline. Now, there are some caveats in here. Some teams didn't have a first-round pick to move in their cup year. Vegas used theirs to get Jack Eichel, and there were some other teams in a similar spot. Another team like Colorado didn't move a first-round pick, but gave up a lot of assets to go get guys like that year is Lehkonen and the defenseman as well, who I am now somehow blanking. Josh Manson was a second-round pick too. For Vegas, they gave up Zach Dean and ended up getting Ivan Barbashev, so kind of a first-round pick. But do you think there's a lesson to be learned in this from some teams who this year want to go all in and are right in their cup window?
I've been saying this for years, that we end up in a spot where teams chase their tail. Sometimes less is more. I mean, it's about finding the right fit, and no one knows what that is at the time. It's not necessarily the most expensive fit. Like, look at Washington here, 2017-18. Do you remember who their big trade deadline acquisition was?
Michael Kempny for like a fourth.
Yeah, it's not about the biggest splash. And Pittsburgh, they did a lot of their shopping ahead of time. Remember how they changed things, bringing in Trevor Daley? Like, there are guys along the way that you add that it doesn't necessarily show up at the deadline in March, the first week, where you plug that guy in and all of a sudden, you ratchet up from a cup contender to, the favorite. That's not typically how it works. And so, when we get to deadline time, there's a reason why we call it silly season, because people kind of go nuts and there's 5, 6, 7, 8 first-round picks traded. I wouldn't be surprised to see more this year, given what a lot of organizations feel about the upcoming draft. So I get the idea of wanting to do something, but it's almost like if you don't get the first thing on your wish list, you should probably sit out.
Yeah, it does actually. When you look back at some past moves, the check down options are often what get teams in trouble a little bit. And an interesting article, it's going to drop today, dailyfaceoff.com. On that note, let's move along to our big segment for the day. It's the Blue Paint, and it's brought to you by Charm Diamond Centers. You can get a custom ring built and delivered in less than 4 weeks through the Charm Masterpiece program. It all comes with an unbeatable pricing policy. For more information, go to charmdiamondcenters.com. Always a pleasure to welcome in former NHL goaltender Carter Hutton, the host of the Starting Goalie Show here on Daily Faceoff as well. And Huts, let's start with one of those cup contending teams, and it's Colorado. They made a big move. They went and got Mackenzie Blackwood, and it's paying off so far. He's been great so far since donning an Avs jersey. And I guess my question to you, how sustainable is this? Like, 938 is insane. He's not keeping that up, but is he legit standalone number one guy? Does he have that ceiling in Colorado?
I think he does, truthfully. I've been a big backer of Mackenzie Blackwood for a long time. I'm a little biased, right? He's a Thunder Bay guy. I get a chance to skate with him all the time. And he's a perfect example of what it takes to be a guy. He has all the tools, right? But now there's maturity involved, right? He's just 28. I think it was the day he was traded. Now he goes to Colorado with the skill set of being in Jersey, dealing with his ups and downs, and being in San Jose. And now a team that does a full switch over, bringing in Scott Wedgwood, bringing in Mackenzie Blackwood. I think he's at a point now where he understands the game better. And conversations I've had with him during the summer was how he's learned to care less, right? And it's always a tricky thing to say for a fan to listen to that. But at the same time, just understanding what he can control in the rink. And I think going into an atmosphere with a culture like Colorado, he's excelling and he has the physical attributes to do it. And it's been fun to watch so far.
Let me ask you a quick follow-up to that then. If you were to look in the Western Conference, like there are teams, there's the Winnipegs with Hellebuck, Dallas has Ottinger, standalone kind of guy. But if I were to give you the Blackwood-Wedgwood duo, the Aiden Hill-Ilya Samsonov duo, and the Stuart Skinner-Calvin Pickard duo, how would you rank them in terms of trust level heading into the stretch drive and into the playoffs?
Ooh, that's tricky. I think going into the playoffs, right, you got to obviously hellebuck the Jets. They're at where they're at. The biggest question mark for me would be Skinner again. I guess the Jekyll and Hyde of his game, especially Picard. I would put Scott Wedgwood ahead of Calvin Picard as a backup. I think Wedgwood has more of an upside in that sense. So I think I would rate them pretty high. But then, for Samsonov, I think he's durable. And then you add in the Aiden Hill comment. So I think number one right now for me, the way Mackenzie Blackwood is playing, is going to be that Colorado team. And the fact that I think they can outscore him if he has a bad game too. This is a team that gives up a lot of chances, and Mackenzie Blackwood in his history, when he isn't busy, isn't as good. And Colorado's a team that still gives up a lot of shots.
Yeah, I know I'm not the goalie expert, but I would go Edmonton, Vegas, Edmonton. Sorry, I would go Colorado, Vegas, Edmonton in that order.
Yeah, just the unknown of Skinner is something that kind of scares me. He's got his game back. He's playing well, but that unknown Jekyll and Hyde kind of scares me heading into playoffs.
Yeah, and it's not like he hasn't shown in the playoffs the Hyde part. Like Pickard had to step in last year. So
exactly, right? We can't have vacations.
Yeah. So one of the best stories of the year, Huts, has been the Columbus Blue Jackets, but they've kind of survived to this point through a couple weird things. One, they can't win on the road. And two, they've gotten below average goaltending. So when you look at Elvis Merzlikins, look at both these numbers, 887 and 857 from Daniil Tarasov, not good enough. But does Merzlikins have another level to get to, or do they have to consider some alternatives?
No, I think he has another level. I think sometimes Elvis gets in his own way, right? We've seen him come out, talk about going to a trade. And I think what's going to happen here, what I see is Dean Evanson coming in and adding in some non-negotiables, something I like to talk about a lot in winning cultures and teams I've played on. And this team can score goals, but I think for Elvis, he needs to understand that he's part of a cog in this lineup. I think there's, an upside to him, but again, you can't be having him go in and play at an 887 if they want to try to make a push to the playoffs. I think it just shows you how weak that Eastern Conference is, with 7 teams that you consider playoff teams, and the rest from 8 to almost down to, other than Buffalo, the New York Islanders, anyone could really be in that spot. So I think for Merzlikins, the second half, he's going to really have to show how he can be a number one and help this team get over the top.
So turning our attention a little bit further north to the Toronto Maple Leafs, they've gotten good goaltending all year. Anthony Stolarz was fantastic, then went down with the knee injury. And since then, Joe Wall's been really good as well. When you look at this tandem as a whole, are you a believer? Do they have what it takes to get to where they want to get to with these two guys?
Frank, honestly, I am. And it's more, I think, the Craig Berube effect, right? I think he's got a team of superstars that are buying into playing the right way and trying to get ready to play playoff hockey. And for Joseph Woll, obviously, there's that black cloud of health that is always going to fly above him, right? And I think this is a good example of Anthony Stolarz goes down, who's arguably could be one of the MVPs of the Leafs season early in the first half. Now it's Joseph Woll's net, and he's been healthy and he's played very well. So I see his upside and his ceiling growing as it goes. But again, I think that'd be the main question mark heading into the playoffs, because at this point, it seems like formality for the Leafs. No matter what they do in the regular season, no one's really going to care until they can get it done come playoff time.
Do you think there's anything to Stolarz? And again, I know he's hurt right now, but you look at his games played throughout his career, not a guy who's had to, play a ton of hockey late into the season and rack up 50, 60 games when you include the playoffs. Is there any concern there, or the fact that they have Woll to lean on, is that enough?
I think that it's nice to have that safety blanket, but I also feel like it was a little bit of mismanagement from my side watching that. He played a game against New Jersey where he was very good. He was the MVP of the game. He kept them in there, and Austin Matthews was able to score a goal in overtime and win that game. And then they have a day off and they have Anaheim, and they go back to him, which I didn't really totally understand when you have a Joseph Woll who's healthy and ready to go. So especially for a guy in his 30s, he's never really had that kind of regime, played a ton of minutes, where similar to me, like when I went from playing, 30, 35 games to I went to a year of 50 in Buffalo. That's a huge jump, especially on a team that gives up some chances. You have to work. So I like their chances come playoff time with both of them. And I think you can kind of play off each other who's the hot hand. But the way Joseph Woll just continues to grow his ceiling in his game, I think he is the guy that has the potential to bring them where they need to go.
Let me wrap up with one more on a couple of struggling goalies in the Eastern Conference. We talked a lot about the Boston Bruins today, and Jeremy Swayman's had a couple of nice moments, but below 900 on the year after signing that big contract. I think they would like the save percentage to be a little bit further away from his cap hit. And Ilya Sorokin's another one, as the Islanders sit just kind of down in the basement of the East, granted not by a lot. Either one of these two guys, like, we're at the halfway point of the season. I think you have to be concerned a little bit, but do you like a bounce back from either one more than the other?
I honestly don't really hate where Swayman's game's at, too. I also feel like he's a guy that he ate an 8-goal game against and a 7-goal game against earlier in the year. And trust me, as a goalie, like having those on your resume throughout a season really hurts your numbers and the longevity of it. But he's got to be a difference maker, right? And someone's kind of taught to me, my goalie coach in Nashville, Mitch Korn, talking about Pekka Rinne versus if you're making that kind of money, you have to be a difference maker every night. You need to be one of the best players on the rink. And at times he is, and at times he isn't. He needs to find that consistency. And I think for Swayman, it's the fact of you don't have Linus Ullmark's not there anymore. Like, you have the keys to the castle. You don't have that safety blanket of knowing when your starts are going to be. You need to be that guy every night. And I don't think he's got there. And then on the other side for Sorokin, the fact of the matter is it feels like he needs to play perfect hockey. He needs to play at a level that is going to get this Islanders team back in the race, because they're a team where what exactly are they? Are they buyers, sellers? Are they trying to make the playoffs? Because they're somewhere in the middle with a lack of scoring power. Sorokin's got to be a difference maker every night. And it's a lot to ask of a player who doesn't get a lot of offense from his team.
Former NHL goaltender Carter Hutton turned betting oracle on the Starting Goalies show. You can get his picks over on the Starting Goalies tab of the website. Thanks for hopping on, Huts.
Hey, thanks, guys.
Inbox question and poll question results brought to you by Dominion Lending Center. If your mortgage is up for renewal in 2025, hit up our friends at Dominion Lending to lock in the best rates and products. Dominion Lending Centers, find them online, dominionlending.ca. Frank, let's get to the let's do the poll question results first, Pat. I'm not sure if we have them up yet, but it was a question about what the Buffalo Sabres could do at the deadline. Trade one of Cozens or Byram. They were each options. Trade both or trade none. Frank, if you had a vote, which one would you pick?
Trade both. Let me just play hypothetical. And I know everyone's afraid about what happens if the player gets back to that level. What if he doesn't? And what if his value is not good relative to his cap hit and you've got that on your books? What if he just is it's not that there's anything wrong with a 20-goal, 45-point player, but you jumped and signed him to that contract early thinking it would be a value deal. What if it isn't? What if the value that you have right now because of the unknown is better than it will ever be? And what if Byram is not going to be a fit long-term? Like, what do you want to pay Byram relative to what you're paying the other two guys that you have at the top of your team, plus Matthias Samuelsson and that tough contract? Can you really afford to commit to, I don't know, what's Byram going to be worth? 7?
Maybe more even. He might want to bridge and then get closer to UFA years. Like, you might have to really pay him if you want to keep him around. Well,
so that's what I'm saying. If he's worth a 7, 8, whatever you want to call it, so then you pay Dahlin, you're paying Power. Like, how do you afford to do it all? You end up in a cap crunch and you're not winning with these guys. Shake it up. Let's do it. Let's go.
Frank, a bunch of people in the chat, Rusty, McDowse, they all agree with you. So does 45% of the Twitter and 41% of our YouTube chat voting for the trade both option. Let's continue along. Get to our daily bets for the day, brought to you by Bet365. Download the app. Use the promo code NATION. Whatever the moment, it's never ordinary at Bet365. Just needed a Matt Tkachuk goal yesterday. Had the Panthers on the puck line, but the same gamer didn't hit. Tonight, I like the Tampa Bay Lightning up against the Boston Bruins. The Bolts have been a pretty good home bet this season, 12-7 straight up. The Bruins, as we touched on, struggling a little bit as of late with just 3 wins in their last 10. And on the road this year, they are 8-13. So a nice juicy plus 155 on the Tampa Bay Lightning to cover the puck line against the Bruins, and a shot prop parlay going Nikita Kucherov and Leon Draisaitl, 2 of the biggest goal scorers in the league. Kucherov has hit this prop in 4 straight and 7 of 10. Draisaitl in 4 of 5 and also 7 of 10. Play them together. It's plus 127. Let's move along, wrap up the show with a little bit of garbage time. And if you want to get nice and fired up here on a Thursday, let's take a listen in to former NHLer Olli Jokinen firing up his Finnish team in the locker room. Run the clip, Pat.
Because it's not enough. Is it fucking satisfying to be 5th place, 6th place, whatever the fucking case is? Let's take that fucking step now. Every fucking game, every shift has to fucking mean something. Time to fucking step it up. We can still do something about it. Or you wanna let this slip away?
Everything from the sweater to the mustache to the Finnish F-bombs. That was great.
I just love that the team posted it.
Yeah.
Like, and also not bleeped out. So, yeah, I was a little surprised to see that on our family friendly YouTube channel here, but, I would run through a wall for Olli Jokinen, and look, a really talented player in his own right, smart hockey mind. I think put NHL coach on his resume at some point.
Yeah, why not? Bruce Boudreau would be proud, says J-Rock. Yes, a Bruce-worthy speech. That's a wrap on today's edition of the show. Big shout out to Carter Hutton for swinging by, our producer, Pat Puff. Great work as well. Everyone, enjoy your Thursday. Enjoy the big slate of hockey games tonight. Crosby versus McDavid at 7 o'clock Eastern as well. And we'll be right here on the Daily Faceoff YouTube to break it all down tomorrow at noon Eastern. Chat with you then. What's up, hockey fans? If you enjoyed that video, then you're going to want to hit the subscribe button to not miss any of our content. From daily live shows with Frank Saravalli to analysis from former NHLers to exclusive interviews with some of the biggest names in the hockey world on Frankly Speaking. You're going to want to hit that subscribe button and stay up to date with everything going on in the hockey world.